let's talk a little bit about privilege. Um, it's a tricky topic, I think, to talk about, and I kind of want to be brief about it. So the title of today's video is "Shut Up, Your Privilege" or "Your Privilege, Shut Up." I forgot which one, but the general gist of it is, I think in more recent years, I think conversations around privilege have come up more, which I think is a good thing. The idea of listening to the voices of people who are not privileged, and especially when you are in a privileged position, to be willing to listen to voices that tell you that you have a privilege and that, um, at the very least, to not take it for granted. Whether you do anything more with it is, I guess, a different thing, another level. But what I want to talk about is not that. What I want to talk about is something in which I have privilege, and that makes it a little bit difficult to talk about. So, what I'm referring to is a privilege that I think is definitely prevalent in Singapore, maybe a bit differing in extent in other countries, but being smart in school. It's kind of been many years since I've been in school, but at the same time, I think um, academic results are very much an important part of Singapore culture in a way. So I think there is still a lot of importance and privilege placed on people who score well academically, and no matter what age you are, people will still look at your past results and be like, you were smart or you are smart, whichever they say. And I don't think, well, okay, I don't want to go on a tangent about it. So I'm not going to talk about how results and how smart you are not directly related necessarily. Um, there are some correlations, but it's also got to do with other things. But I think what I want to talk about in terms of privilege is that when you are, in this case, like me, privileged in the sense of you are smart, it's hard to talk about cases, not cases, it's hard to talk about situations in which, while having this privilege, you struggle. And what I mean is, I think the first time I realized that smart people are allowed to struggle in academics, and that the results are not a negation, and that good results are not a negation of the struggle, is in university at orientation. I had a second year senior who did physics. I don't know this person very well. It was just a senior in the house that I was in, but they did physics, which is, a pure science major, quite rare to do in Singapore, I think. Um, well, maybe not quite rare, but it's not a very common course to take. Because most people would take something a bit more applied and not pure physics. And I think the thing that everybody was talking about this senior, even before you personally knew him, was that he has a full GPA, like I think 5.0 GPA. Granted, he was only in his second year at that time, and I don't know if it's fact or just rumors, but I believe he maintained that GPA for most of his years. And if not, he was probably still, very near the top of his cohort, if not the top of his cohort. And I think the thing that struck me was that despite his, good results, in fact, I would say incredible results, Um, he got quite pissed one day when like his friends were teasing him about how he's so smart and like how he won't relate to their struggles of like cramming before exams, um, studying hard, trying to get notes, doing whatever you can to try to, push up your marks a little bit before the exams. And he got pissed about his friend saying that he can't relate. And what he said was something along the lines of, just because I get good results doesn't mean that I don't struggle um, in my way there. And that was probably just a, throwaway comment, probably just like something he said. But it's stuck with me for a long time because I think it's hard to talk about your struggles when you have privilege. And I think it's something that we see also in the trend of like men who have struggles, um the whole phenomenon of like nobody really listens to it, and that's how a lot of them end up getting into incel circles, because that happens to be the only place where their difficulties are heard and not just dismissed with you're a man, you're privileged. Just like how can you be struggling if you're privileged? And I think that's the part that is difficult. You can be struggling if you have privilege. It's a different kind of struggle from the people who don't have privilege, and I'm not dismissing the struggles um when people don't have privilege, because I have also been in positions in which I am not the privileged one. It's just in the case of academics, I reside in the camp of having privilege, and I don't know, I just feel like it's not a helpful way to look at things, to just outright dismiss them being like, you're privileged, shut up, I don't want to hear about your struggles. And it's not just for this, I think it happens for a lot of things. Sometimes it's simple, um, like, sometimes people complain about how it's hard to find a good guy when they're trying to date. And then they're like, oh, men are like this, men are like that. And in a way, it's kind of throwaway comments, but at the same time, I mean, they're not wrong outright. There is generally a pattern of maybe certain negative behavior from men, but at the same time, I don't usually say much because, being a person in the real world, sometimes you just, like, your friends just need to rant, and sometimes it's just a rant and it'll pass. But then sometimes it's also like at what point does it become dismissive? Um, Especially I think when we are talking about actual real people that you know in real life, it gets to be a bit like yeah, maybe there is a stereotype that certain groups of people are a certain way. But when it comes to each individual person, it just feels very dismissive to be like, just because they have privilege, their struggles are not valid. And I think the thing that annoys me is really the fact that it's so hard to talk about it. And it gets to a point where you kind of pick your audience when you want to rant about struggles within a privilege status that you might have, because otherwise all you get is just people yapping about how you're privileged, and like the actual struggle portion of things just never gets to be worked out, never gets to be heard. And I mean, on one hand I get it, like I don't think it is the right audience to talk about your struggles of being privileged to people who are not privileged in the same group of things. Like I can see well, I mean, I'm not underprivileged in this way, but for example, I can see like if I don't do well academically, how it's frustrating to hear somebody who is doing well academically complain about how difficult it is to study because I feel like I struggle just as hard and I don't get good results. But then again, there is a bit of that tying of like the results with the process, right? Like just because the results are better doesn't mean the process was easy. Like those two don't need to be related. But definitely in things in which I am somewhat less privileged, like let's say being, well, arguably being a woman or female bodied at least, on the outside. It's sometimes annoying to hear men talk about things like it's fine to call like your co-workers things like 小妹妹 because it's fine if they call me 小弟弟, which translates to like small sister and small brother, younger sister, younger brother. But it kind of has a weird context of being a bit like, the way I usually describe it is like the terms 小妹妹 and 小弟弟, the repetition of the word somehow make them creepier. They kind of give me the context of like a weird stranger coming out from a van trying to lure you into the van with sweets as a kid. Um, so yeah, I sometimes find like hearing men calling younger co-workers 小妹妹 kind of weird. Like maybe they don't mean anything bad by it, but then like I would mention it, and their argument that it's fine if I call them 小妹妹 because you can call me 小弟弟, and like to them it's equivalent, but I don't think it is, and I think it's a case in which they probably should listen. Um, and I'm not saying that men don't have struggles, but like I get it. Like it's annoying to hear somebody of privilege complain about stuff. I just realized that example was not a good example at all to illustrate how it's annoying to hear somebody with more privilege complain about stuff. But like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I don't know, ultimately at the end of the day, I try to take whatever experience people say they have as valid in and of itself. And it's a bit difficult because I think we tend to jump to certain conclusions with all our contexts and other associations. But like, I don't know, I just feel like person to person, it's dismissive and hurtful to kind of be told that, hey, you're privileged, shut up, um, without ever really trying to hear out what the other person might say. I'm not saying you're wrong for saying it, but I'm saying that like, yeah, it's when you're the one receiving it, it kind of sucks. But also at the same time, I don't know where the boundary between like this being a social thing versus a personal responsibility thing lies, because like ultimately society is made up of individuals, and individual actions will change society, but also like you are a person, so you gotta take care of your own, you know, boundaries, what you can and cannot take, in that moment at least. So like, I'm not saying like you have to listen to people of privilege telling you how bad their life gets, but at the same time, like maybe don't shut them up all the time. I don't know. It's hard to say because I know I can't personally spare the energy to listen to all of it. So I know it's definitely a nuanced stance, but that's what I've been thinking about. Alright, see you in the next video. Bye. So, first of all, I want to show you the bag that I made. If you refer to a previous video, I was talking about customizing the bag, so I did it. This is what it looks like now. I will probably post a process of it.